So for the dreads, I'm going to unhide them here and select them all. And let's go to the UV editor. And of course I deleted the UVs, so we don't have any UVs there. So what I'm going to do is switch to a top camera and zoom in like that. And I'm going to do UV. We could do camera based. That works. So this is creating a different UV shell for each dreadlock here. So with the shells selected, I'm going to go into the UV toolkit and down here under distribute, I'm going to choose layout along U. That's just going to lay out each individual shell along the U axis. You can see they're different lengths, and since they're projected from the top here, they're all kind of bent. So what I'm going to do is now kind of flatten them out or do an unfold and then stack the resulting shells. So to do an unfold, what I want to do is I'm going to cut off the top and the bottom of the dreads and then create a seam and then unfold it so it flattens out. So switch to edge selection mode. I'm going to double click on this edge. You can see it's selected there. Let's turn on border highlighting. And then I'll choose cut. So it makes a cut along those edges. And I'm going to right click and choose UV shell and move this shell out of the way. This one, there we go. Do the same for the top. And then right click, choose edge. I'm going to double click on one of these edges here. There we go. You can see it's all highlighted all the way down. If I turn on wireframe, you can see it's highlighted all the way down. Now I'll choose cut to make a seam. I'm going to select the shell and choose unfold. You can see it flattens it out. And I can also choose to optimize it. So let's turn on the shaded view that shows kind of the pinching and the stretching. You can see the shell is almost completely white, so there's not much stretching or pinching going on, which is pretty cool. But we can try doing an optimize on it just to see if that improves it. Not much of a change there, so that's good news. Unfold that, and then unfold that little cap part there. So then I'm just going to repeat this process for the other dreadlocks here. And so I'll come back when that's all complete, and then we'll take a look at how we can stack them together. One thing you can do to save a little time, keep in mind that this model, as we take a look at it from the top, it is actually symmetrical. So if I set symmetry to world X, or in this case world X or object X, but I'm going to go with world X. I can cut my UV unwrapping time in half because they're symmetrical. So if I go down here and double click on this edge, it's going to do it on both of these dreadlocks here, and then I can do a cut and move those out of the way. Whoops. Let's make sure we're in UV shell selection mode and move these out of the way. And I can do the same thing on this one. Edge, double click on that edge, cut, and you can see that it's symmetrical, and I can even cut this edge right here, symmetry across this axis, select the UV shell and choose unfold, unfold, and cuts my time in half. So I'll just select this. So that's kind of convenient. So I'm going to select these UV shells, hold the shift key while clicking on each one of them. And let's just move them out of the way for a second. I'm going to select these UV shells and choose stack, and they're going to put them all on top of each other. So you can see right here, these are all the end caps for the dreadlocks. So I'm going to move these out of the way for a moment. I'm going to select these UV shells. Actually, let's select these that are kind of upside down here and rotate them so they're not as upside down. Select them all, and we can choose stack and orient. So it rotates them all together and stacks them at the same time. Some of them, of course, are rotated horizontally, so I'll just select those. And actually what we can do is go into the rotate section under transform, click on this button to rotate it by 90 degrees. I'm going to select all of the shells and let's align them along the UVs. So we'll go down to arrange and layout and click on layout along with U selected, so they're all along the U axis. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on the UVs to select all the UVs within the shell, and under unfold I'm going to click on straighten UVs. It's going to take a few moments, but you can see the results, kind of a rectangular kind of shape, and then there's a couple that just need to be moved out here. There we go, just these corner edges here. I'm going to do this for each one of the shells so that they're kind of a perfect grid, because I'm going to lay them on top of each other. So double click on this UV, choose under unfold, straighten UVs. You can restrict this to one axis if you want, or specify. Then what I can do is I can select these UV shells and stack them on top of each other. I'll move these guys on top of these other UV shells and use the scale tool to kind of align them. So that they're about the same scale. Let's see. Just select them all and go stack shells. And I'll just do that for the rest of the shells until they're all on top of each other. And then scale them up so that they're all occupying as much texture space as I can get. Let's see. Let's pretend that these are stacked on top of those other shells. So I'd move all the shells together so that they still fit within the 0 to 1 space. Maybe scale it up a little bit more. I'm not as worried about the precision on the tips here. I'm going to select all of these though and just do a quick unfold so they're all more round, and then scale them up so they match about the right size. But these are the ends of the dreadlocks, which are not going to really be seen that much, so I don't have to get too overly precise with them. But that's the basic idea of how you can create UVs, stacked UVs for all of the dreadlocks so that they share one texture, which of course is a great way to save in terms of texture memory, especially if you're texturing something for games in which texture memory is at a premium. One downside of using this particular method, if I had all of the dreads on top of each other and scaled, then what we're going to find is that we're going to have different scales for the different length dreadlocks, right? Because I'm scaling them up and down, as opposed to like maybe this method where you might want to just stack the ones that are kind of about the same scale on top of each other. So if I select these guys, actually let's switch to UV shell mode. So I can select these shells and choose stack shells. And so the ones that are about the same size would be stacked on top of each other. And that way that the texture space that they occupy would be more consistent with their size in 3D space. And I'll scale these guys up. So they're about the same size. Well, actually what I should do now is just select them all and choose align along layout along U. You can see now, let's make sure that we have the end caps out of the way. You can see now they occupy the appropriate amount of texture space, so we don't have different scales for the different dreads. Again, just depends on whether you're planning on using like one texture for all of the dreads, or maybe several different, you want to do several different paintings for each dread or something along those lines. You could even stack these ones that are kind of a similar size, so that takes up a little bit less texture space. So we could do stack these. I'll probably straighten out these edges a little bit more, but I'm just kind of giving you a quick demo, some ideas and different strategies that you can use for the dreadlocks here, or the tinted dreads, or whatever they are. So now what I can do, I can select all these and scale it up a little bit more, so just squeezing out a little bit more texture space while keeping the sizes consistent with their size in 3D space. If you are going to have them so that you're going to use just one texture like I was doing before for all of the dreads, you'll notice when I actually cut the seams along the edges of these dreads, I kind of did it randomly in the UV editor, but that would work if the texture that's going to be applied to these is kind of uniform around the circumference of the dreadlock, kind of like this checker pattern, right? But let's say, for instance, I wanted to have one type of detail on the top of each one of these things and a different one on the bottom, right? In that case, you probably want to be a little bit more careful about the seam that you select for each one of these objects. In other words, you want to make sure you select the same seam for each dreadlock, which is a little bit tricky because they're kind of twisted around and stuff, but you want it to be consistent with the edge that you select before you do the unfold. So you'd select the same edge or edge loop on each one of the dreadlocks, and then you would cut along that edge and then do your unfold. So that way you would ensure that you painted a texture and you wanted the same, basically like one color on the top and another color on the bottom. You'd be consistent with all of the different dreadlocks. So I hope these techniques give you some ideas on different ways you can stack your shells in order to economize the texture space you're using for the model.